All right, diving right in today. We're looking at Iran again, and you guys have been checking out some really interesting stuff in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Lots to unpack here. We've got clips, analyses, the whole 9 yards, all about Iran's supreme leader, Khamenei, and these pretty bold statements he's been making. Seems like he's distancing himself from groups Iran's usually associated with.
Right.
Hezbollah, Hamas, you know the names.
Yeah.
Saying they're not actually taking orders from Tehran.
It's a pretty big shift.
Huge. So let's get into why this is such a big deal.
Well, it really shakes things up, doesn't it? I mean, the whole idea of Iran's influence, how we've always understood it.
Yeah. For years, everyone's assumed those groups were basically Iran's tippets, their proxies.
Exactly, doing Tehran's dirty work.
The axis of resistance, some call it.
Right, but now Khamenei is saying, nope, Iran doesn't need proxies. Hezbollah, Hamas, even the Houthis in Yemen, he claims they're all driven by their own beliefs, not by orders from him.
And he even went so far as to say that if we want to act one day, we don't need a proxy force.
Wow.
So, gotta ask, why is he saying all this now? Is it all just to ease international pressure, get those sanctions lifted?
Part of it, sure, but I think it goes deeper than that.
You think so?
I do, yeah. This feels more strategic, like he's trying to reshape how everyone, at home and abroad, sees Iran.
I see what you mean. Like to the world, he's saying, hey, we're not pulling the strings here.
Exactly. These groups, they're acting on their own.
But wouldn't that weaken how powerful people think Iran is in the region?
That's the catch, isn't it? It's a bit of a paradox. Less direct control, yeah, but also way less vulnerability. If these groups are their own thing, Iran's off the hook.
So no more sanctions, no military action against Iran because of what these groups are doing.
Exactly. Harder to justify, at least.
So they're trying to have their cake and eat it too.
You got it.
Yeah.
Influence without the risk. It's clever, really.
Huh?
But here's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay, lay it on me.
While Khamenei's saying all this, there's evidence that Iran's still supporting these groups, just maybe a bit more quietly.
So actions speak louder than words, huh? What kind of support are we talking about?
Think financial aid to Hezbollah, training for Hamas, intelligence sharing with the Houthis, the works.
It's a tangled web, that's for sure.
It is, yeah, and it really makes you think, are they redefining what a proxy even is in this day and age?
It's a good point. But what about Israel in all this? They see Iran as a huge threat.
Oh, for sure they do.
What's their take on this whole proxy situation?
Israel's stance, crystal clear. They see any Iranian activity anywhere in the region as a direct threat to their security. And they're not sitting around, they're taking action.
You're talking about those airstrikes in Syria, right?
Yeah.
On supposed Iranian targets.
Yep, and even hitting Houthi targets in Yemen. Their message is loud and clear. Iran, stay out of our backyard. No foothold for you, not directly, not through proxies, no way. So on one side, you've got Iran downplaying their connections, but still lending a hand here and there. On the other, Israel's taking a hard line. Recipe for more tension, wouldn't you say?
Definitely seems like it.
Yeah. And to really grasp what's going on, we got to look at Syria. Adds a whole other layer to this already messy situation.
Right, the HTS taking over Damascus, that whole thing.
Precisely. And then you have Khamenei urging young Syrians to fight back against them. Doesn't really fit with his no proxies talk, does it?
Bit of a contradiction there, yeah.
For sure. Really makes you wonder about what Iran's actually planning. Are those statements about proxies just talk, or is there a deeper truth there? I think this is where your research comes in.
Absolutely. Syria is definitely a key piece of this puzzle. But before we jump into that, let's make sure we're all on the same page. We've spent a lot of time on Iran's side of things.
Yeah.
I think it's important to see things from the other side, especially from Israel's perspective. They're a major player in this whole geopolitical game.
For sure, their perspective's crucial.
So what about Israel? What are they thinking? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, it makes sense. What are you most curious about?
Well, how do they see the threat from these so-called Iranian proxies? Do they truly believe it's an existential thing, like they say? Or are they overstating it to justify their actions?
That's a great question. And whether you agree with them or not, understanding Israel's point of view is key to understanding the whole situation.
Okay, so let's get into Israel's perspective.
All right.
You mentioned they see any Iranian activity as a threat.
Yeah.
But do they really buy that groups like Hezbollah are just Iran's puppets? Or do they get that these groups have their own goals?
It's tricky, isn't it? I think it's kind of both. You hear Israeli leaders talking about these groups like they're extensions of Iran, like one big, scary, coordinated threat.
Right.
It helps them in a few ways. First off, it makes things simple. Easier to get people on board with being tough on Iran.
Right, the whole us versus them thing.
Exactly. And second, it gives them cover internationally, makes their military actions seem defensive.
Like, we have to do this because Iran is being aggressive.
Exactly. And third, it lets them sidestep the real issues, the legitimate grievances these groups have.
So by focusing on Iran, they can kind of ignore the Palestinian issue.
You got it. But don't get me wrong, I don't think Israel's totally clueless here. Their intelligence is top-notch. They know the region. They know Hezbollah and Hamas have their own agendas, make their own decisions.
Right.
Their goals don't always perfectly match up with Iran's.
So it's more about how they frame it, playing up the Iran threat for their own benefit, even if they know it's more complicated than that.
You hit the nail on the head. It's all about picking the story that works best for them.
Okay, starting to see how the pieces fit, but there's one piece that still feels a little off. Syria?
Ah, yeah.
Khamenei telling Syrians to fight against the HTS, that doesn't exactly scream no proxies, does it?
Yeah.
How does Syria fit into all this?
Syria. Oh, that's a crucial piece, all right. Really shows how messy this whole thing is. See, Syria's been Iran's battleground for influence for years.
Right.
They've poured money and military support into backing Assad. He's a key ally for them in the region.
And then the HTS comes in and takes over Damascus.
Sam, exactly. And HTS, they're linked to al-Qaeda, a direct threat to what Iran wants in Syria.
Threatens their whole plan.
Everything. Their influence, their supply lines to Hezbollah in Lebanon, their position in the region.
So they can't just ignore it.
Nope. Khamenei might be downplaying proxies elsewhere, but in Syria, he's jumping right in.
So Syria changes everything. All bets are off there.
In a way, yeah. Too important for Iran to lose. This is where Khamenei's words and his actions don't match up.
Right.
We've talked about that before, how actions speak louder.
And here, the actions say Iran's still backing their allies, even if they're trying to be sneaky about it.
Exactly. Which brings us to a really big question.
Hey, what is it?
What happens to groups like Hezbollah and Hamas if Iran really does ditch the whole proxy thing?
Good question. What does happen to them? So we've really gone deep on this one, huh? Iran's changing strategy, what it means for their allies, the whole Syria situation, the nuclear question always hanging over everything, and then the global picture on top of it all.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is.
Yeah.
But I think it's clear we're seeing the Middle East going through some major shifts.
Big time. That old order, the one we've known for decades, it's breaking down.
Yeah.
And what's replacing it, well, it's more complicated, more players, more unpredictable.
Or dangerous, even.
Could be, yeah. And Iran's right in the thick of it, trying to figure out where they fit in.
Exactly. They want to be strong, keep their influence,
Right.
scare off their enemies.
Exactly. But they don't want to overreach, end up with more sanctions, or even a war.
So they're walking a tightrope.
That's a great way to put it. And everyone's watching, trying to figure out, is this proxy shift for real? A whole new strategy or just a temporary thing?
Yeah, like, are they really breaking up with these groups or just taking a break?
Hard to say for sure right now, but one thing's for sure. Israel, Saudi Arabia, the U.S., they're all paying close attention.
Yeah, they can't afford not to.
Every move Iran makes could have huge ripple effects.
Like the game of chess, one wrong move.
Exactly. And in chess, sometimes the quietest moves are the most powerful.
True that. Okay, so let's put ourselves in Khamenei's shoes for a second.
All right.
What can he do? What are his options here?
Well, we talked about sticking with the proxies, but maybe being more careful about it. Less out in the open, fly under the radar a bit.
Right, but that could backfire.
Right.
Make those groups even more extreme.
Exactly. They might feel like Iran's abandoned them and lash out.
So what else could he do?
Some people think he might go the other way, build up Iran's regular military, become a more traditional power.
Wow, that's a big change.
It is, but think about it. Project power directly, no middlemen, total control.
And it would definitely show everyone they mean business.
Oh, for sure, but it's risky, too. Could lead to a clash with Israel, even the U.S.
Yeah, that's a whole other level.
Exactly. It's a gamble, a big one.
High stakes.
You said it. And that's why understanding all the angles, all the motivations, it's so important.
Absolutely. Okay, so as we wrap this up, what are the big things for our listeners to keep in mind?
First off, the Middle East, it's complicated. There are no easy answers, no good guys and bad guys.
Yeah, too many people try to oversimplify it.
Right, you got to look at it from all sides, understand the nuances.
And don't just listen to what people say. Watch what they actually do.
Oh yeah, actions speak louder than words. Always.
Especially in this part of the world.
Definitely. And last but not least, stay curious. Keep learning, get your info from different places.
Keep asking questions.
Exactly. Things are changing all the time, and the more you know, the better you'll understand what's going on.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We've gone deep into Iran's influence, how it's changing, what it means for the whole region. It's been fascinating.
Glad to be here. It's been a great conversation.
It has. And to everyone listening, keep your eyes on the news, stay informed. This story is far from over,
Just getting started.
and the stakes are only getting higher.